My name is Joshua Johnson. I am the Senior Director of Solutions Architecture at EdgeNext, and I have been in this industry probably as long as Steph has and Ilker has and Serkan has. I've been since the late 90s. And I'm going to talk basically about the challenges of emerging markets and trying to grow those opportunities. The emerging markets would be what we consider emerging markets, from the point of view of EdgeNext, are your China's, your Southeast Asia, um, your Middle East, your Latin America. A lot of these, countries, that's kind of where we focus. And some of the things that Ilker and Sirkan touched on, the multi-CDN strategy, the edge compute, the security pieces, the diversification, the challenges in providing the scaling of all these different of streams in those markets, it's key. Because of these emerging markets, not all growing at the same time. They do not all have the same infrastructure that Europe has, North America has. Some of these foundational countries that are really that you're used to delivering to. If you look at the China market, and it's been growing over the past, 10 years exponentially. And, it's got over 884 million people shopping online. It's one of their biggest industries for streaming media. They use their WeChat application and WeChat mini programs to deliver streaming content. They use a lot of influencer-based streaming solutions in there. They have, they have a diversified, networks, but at the same time, they have only three primary networks that are all government controlled. So it can be a bit of a challenge to get the streaming to be stable and distributed well. On top of the fact that in the China market, they aren't as advanced in technologies as far as, they are still, because they have a kind of a closed system, they are still using RTMP. They have their own browsers, and they, RTMP is a delivery mechanism as opposed to just an ingest process. You look a lot of the opportunities in China from that point of view. You look at the e-commerce side of things. You're looking at the iGaming. Now, believe it or not, yeah, iGaming is in there, but it's not supposed to be in there. You look at the gaming industry, and it is the largest phone gaming, mobile gaming industry in the world, and providing that type of performance at a high resolution to all of those devices. In China, they essentially live on their phones. We think our kids do here. You walk down the streets in China, and they literally are walking down the streets with their head down on their phone constantly. So it's the market itself is huge. It's there for the taking, but there are restrictions. If you start looking at the Southeast Asia market over the last few years, it has grown exponentially. It has now hit the $100 billion mark from the streaming side, and for e-commerce, iGaming, gaming, biggest industries in there. But once again, you've got distributed countries that are supposedly supporting it, and you've got different infrastructures. You've got different connectivity. One of the biggest challenges there is that you don't have a lot of still government-controlled technology, and and government-controlled telecommunications, and they don't talk to each other. So you have these challenges of building in the right locations, building out towards the end user to provide that smooth stream, and so you have to adapt. That's where actually a lot of where Sirkan was talking, where you end up with a multi-CDN strategy. You may not have a CDN that's very good in Indonesia, but they might be better in Vietnam. They might be better in Taiwan. So you have to start looking at this and marrying up the different CDN opportunities because of those performance opportunities, and well as the costs. The cost of doing business in these emerging markets is still very, very high. You look at you look at the ISP costs and the bandwidth costs, and they are still extremely high. You look at Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong; those are not going down. Australia can be considered an emerging market, but it's because it's so isolated. Its ISP costs are high building out there. So getting that there and putting in infrastructure there can be very costly. So you start looking at the multi-CDN all the different CDNs that are there. You know, the challenge for all of this is finding that niche in these emerging markets, presenting to the appropriate groups. E-commerce is, like I said, is a very, very big one. The Asia-Pac is huge in the iGaming industry, and they're making huge inroads there. But once again, you have rules. Start looking at now Middle East. One of the things that EdgeNext is doing is we are actually focusing on expanding out in the emerging markets. Our focus is China, Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Latin America. And so therefore, we are actually trying to look into what those industries, what the industries are, what the focus is, where things are growing, what the coverage is. There are challenges in each one of these markets. Your 4G and 5G coverage is not great everywhere. I mean, we've got very good coverage here in Europe, but you start looking at some of these emerging markets, and while they might have 4G coverage, they don't have 5G coverage. So that impacts your stream quality, your ability to provide positive delivery to these industries. You look into Middle East, and what you have there is you've got your countries like the UAE, you've got Saudi Arabia, you've got Iraq and Iran, and even though Iran is not one that people kind of push against, but you've got all of these different, and then Africa, you don't have great coverage everywhere. In Iraq, it was like the wild, wild west a couple of years ago, where all of the different providers were battling against each other, and there was no standardization across as far as providing services to their end users. So, the performance here, the performance on one ISP might be different than another, and they're doing constant construction and constantly going down. I know that, and subsequently they had a woman that took over the industry as far as the telecommunications industry standardizations in Iraq to turn around and basically standardize things. And they put rules in place, but these aren't happening everywhere. Saudi Arabia is putting a large amount of money into infrastructure, building out, trying to become a standard there. And what's happening in a dominant player, and there's a lot of, but the problem is you've also got to work with joint ventures to do anything there. So you look at that, their initiative right now, one of the crown princes is turning around, and he wants to become one of the video gaming centers of the world. He wants to promote that, and they're actually bringing in initiatives to build that up. To do these things, though, they need infrastructure. So the opportunity is there, but they don't have the infrastructure yet, and therefore it becomes a challenge in getting good quality streaming there. Getting yourself built into those building there is not easy. So now, once again, we go back to the multi-CDN strategy, and you have to start looking at, okay, who is there? Who can deliver there? How can they deliver there? As I mentioned, 4G and 5G coverage, it is in Latin America, it's not that great yet. I mean, yes, they've got 5G around, but you start looking at some of these countries, and where there's less population, there's no coverage. You might find it interconnecting between large cities, Sao Paulo. You get up into Colombia, you get down in Argentina, in those countries, and you'll see all around in Latin America, especially, you're seeing most of your good, strong coverage on the outskirts of the country, outskirts of Latin America, and not in the middle. Now, admittedly, the population isn't as strong there, but you now lose, and you lose out on people. You lose out on the ability to deliver. The Latin American industry in Latin America right now, it is a very, very strong focus. There's a very, very strong focus on gaming. They just had the Brazilian Game Show is coming up has a conference coming on. Very, very big in the gaming industry. iGaming is trying to make inroads into Latin America, and being able to deliver there is key. But it's finding those partners, finding the ISPs, and building your infrastructure, or finding the hardware providers, or possibly multiple CDNs, because you've only got them in strategic locations. And then, because of the needs for latency needs for all of these like iGaming, you've got to have real time. They're talking sub 1 second, sub 500 millisecond delivery times. You've got to deliver. You've got to make sure that you're dealing with protocols that can actually support that. But at the same time, when you start getting to some of the protocols that support that, then it becomes less able to scale and less stable. And when you start having networks that are not as stable, you start having issues with the delivery of the stream. And now you're without 5G, you aren't able to deliver as high a quality stream. So you see, I'm sorry. So you continue. So looking forward on all of these, we are looking at, how do you branch out into this? We look at partners like, your Media Novas, and we look at partners like Akamai, and we look at, your Jetstreams, and Jetstream we do quite a bit of business with. And because we focus on these emerging markets, that ends up being the place that those are the people that we work with, those ones that can actually build there. The challenges, as I've been mentioning, network, it's not stable everywhere. It's not the same everywhere. It's costly depending upon where you are. Your security, depending upon your markets, there's a lot of issues with security in the streaming world, security in some of these emerging markets, because the focus hasn't been on it. You find a lot of theft of streams. You find a lot of hijacking going on. You don't have, so therefore your ability you need to have your security protocols in place, your security services in place, your WAF services, your origin shields, your bot detection, your DDoS protection, etc. These are all key pieces because of those industries. And therefore, with those things going on, the security in the network, your user experience, can lack. And so you end up with a lot of different challenges in trying to deliver in these emerging markets. One of the key things that you have to focus on is compliance. We've got PCI, we've got GDPR, we've got HIPAA, et cetera. But then you start looking at like China, you start looking at Saudi Arabia, you start looking at India, you start looking in the Southeast Asia, and they have their own strict rules as to what content can and cannot be delivered. If you look at China, they're not allowed to have, iGaming delivery in there. And you also have to deal with the fact that it goes through the firewall and then degrades the surface. If you're delivering outside, so you got to find a way to deliver inside, but you can't do it because you have to have an ISCP license. If you look into Saudi Arabia, they have specific content that's not allowed. Iraq so you have to actually work with these countries, find out, make sure that you're following in their compliance rules, and not contracting and trying to push content into those countries that's not allowed. So as I mentioned, 4G and 5G technology, it's not everywhere. I mean, you look here, and we're talking about 5G technology, very strong in the U.S., strong in Latin America, Australia, and also in some parts of Southeast Asia, but not in China, believe it or not. So it's not hugely deployed. It's not in a lot of these emerging markets. You don't find the strength of connection, the strength of delivery. And the problem is that so much of what is being focused on, being delivered now, is being delivered from a mobile's point of view. You're dealing with mobile, handheld devices that are streaming constantly. And if you don't have that kind of connectivity, if you don't have that ability to deliver it to the mass numbers of people that are trying to watch it, you've got to downgrade your stream, and when you're delivering, you've got to provide a less quality to get the stability. But then you still don't guarantee the stability as things scale. So some of the best practices: understanding your user distribution. So once again, what is it? Where are what is the content type? Where are they located? What is the vertical that they're what is their device type? Like I said, China, everybody's on a mobile. Some places still do more desktop, but you don't. Are they rural? Are they urban? Are they interconnected? So placing your POPs, building your POPs and distribution network is key. Where am I going to put it? Is it in this city? Is it in that city? How am I interconnecting? The challenges of the networking in Southeast Asia. Like I said, in one country, you can have 2 or 3 different providers, but because of how they work, they don't peer well. So you now have to contract with both of them. You have to start looking at, how do I peer in another place? And now your costs start to escalate, as well as your performance start to degrade, but you still need to turn around and get to those end users. A lot of the end users, like Ilker was saying, the edge compute pieces are becoming more and more important. You start looking at the ability to distribute specific content to specific end users based upon region. You check where their region is, what their device type is. You're getting all of this data at the edge. Your data being brought in from the logs is key. You want to turn around and say that this end user gets this type of stream because they're in Vietnam, or this end user is in Indonesia, so they're going to have to get another one. And my provider over here isn't as good, so I'm now going to have to switch over to this other CDN because they've got a better connection. So very, very important to understand where you are. CDNs can't be everywhere and be the best everywhere. It's just not possible. You at this point, because it's become a foundational service, you have to pick your niche. You have to find your specialty. You have to find where you really are very good. And that's the key. You start looking at latencies, and this is some of the latencies that we see from different locations. And you have to be able to bring those latencies down, have that stability, not have packet drop, be able to support the lower latency protocols. WebRTC is a big one right now, and it's growing because of its ability to provide real-time streaming. And in some instances, it can scale, but in some instances it does not, and depending upon how you're working with it. Not everybody supports WebRTC. There are people that are working, the mention of low latency HLS was brought up that Apple has. That still doesn't provide you that real time. You can't get down between, down below a 2 to 3 second delay simply because of the way that it's created, it's built. So now, what is the other option? There are some companies that work with, believe it or not, HTTP delivery of sub 1 second. They have based off of WebSockets. So you've got different technologies, but not all of them are. They all haven't been proven, to be that. I mean, WebRTC, if you look back, it was one that was built upon, messaging or conference communication. Bidirectional. It's very versatile because you can layer in different types of functionality, the chat functionality, subtitling, et cetera, but scalability, once again, can be lacking. So a little bit more in latency. You look across the country, you look across China, and our ability to deliver with low latency across China is very good. We have somewhere around 1,100 POPs in China with the ability to deliver that. And like I said, we still deliver using RTMP because they have their own browser, so you're not dealing with the flash issues. But they need to be able to move away from that because not everybody is going to have that. And then once again, compliance. China, ICP. ICP licenses, you need to have, you can't deliver certain content, and you risk being shut down. So, and you also, to deliver off of an infrastructure in China, you have to have an entity in China. So if you don't, then you have to deliver from outside. Now you're dealing with the open internet, trying to deliver across through the firewall where there's delays. Similar things occur across Southeast Asia. Similar things occur in India, where the content is being looked at, it's filtered, and they're checking to make sure it's valid content. And the security piece. You look at this, and we all know that we all deal with nefarious players. We all deal with the DDoS attacks from certain regions. We all deal with the bots that are in there and trying to override all of the traffic and pulling data and everything else. But at the same time, the hijacking that goes on. Because of these emerging markets are essentially, it's like I said, the Wild Wild West. They don't have, a lot of these people, because of the cost, are trying to find ways to take the stream, redistribute it in such a way that it looks like it's coming from them, and their costs go down. A big piece for a lot of these emerging markets is the ability to drive down their costs on their upstream bandwidth. They don't want to be pulling from their partners, so they want to find a way to do this. That includes taking cash, putting in caching systems in place that will take the stream in and redistribute it for themselves without really and degrading the performance. At the same time, they'll turn around and set redirects to another location so that this site is now promoting a live stream like this one here that's not supposed to be promoting it. So it's a key piece for a lot of this is the security pieces, and you have to work with the local governments. You have to work with the local providers to make sure you understand everything that's going on, so that you do abide by that, but you also know that you're following along with what you need to do. And so, in summary, the emerging markets are huge right now. The dollar figures that are able to bring in there for streaming are massive. They're growing at a rapid rate. We've kind of saturated the North America and the European markets, but these markets are there for the picking. They have specific types of content that they very, very much go after: e-commerce, iGaming, video gaming. And obviously short form video is, it's huge everywhere. But the main thing to understand is there are complexities to doing this, and these complexities are assisted by what Serkan was talking about in the multi-CDN strategy, and picking your providers that are good in certain regions and better in other, and not better in other. And then at the same time, you have the edge compute and leveraging the move to edge compute and the ability to take parts of your application and run them out on the edge and get logic and decisions made out on the edge in real time for your end users, and checking quality and content capabilities, and also looking and making real-time decisions as far as the distribution to an end user and what routes you're using and things like that. So all of these things play very, very well together as you try to move out into the emerging markets and build your user base and customer base.